Tonight, prevent genocide, but no ceasefire. The orders to Israel from the United Nations top court.
The court is acutely aware of the extent of the human tragedy.
The first decision in a wider case.
They must stick to international law.
The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous.
The ruling that also urges Hamas to release hostages. A former chef charged with 14 counts of first-degree murder for selling chemicals linked to suicides. Plus, Donald Trump ordered to pay $83 million in damages for defamation. In BC, the debate over cell phones in classrooms heats up with new restrictions announced. And a long-lost dog found far from home.
I never really gave up hope.
His journey from Saskatchewan to Ontario.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. The decision by the International Court of Justice to press ahead in hearing a case of genocide against Israel is receiving much reaction tonight. The World Court ordered Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent acts of genocide in Gaza, but stopped short of calling for an immediate ceasefire. It also called on Hamas to release hostages. CTV's Adrian Gobriel starts us off.
Please be seated.
With the world watching, the International Court of Justice delivered a sweeping ruling.
The court is acutely aware of the extent of the human tragedy that is unfolding in the region.
The United Nations top court delivered 6 orders it says Israel must follow. They include a call for Israel to prevent any acts of genocide, take immediate steps to ensure humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza, preserve any evidence of genocide, and submit a report. While the ruling stopped short of calling for a ceasefire, the court did call on Hamas to release all remaining hostages.
This case was very much about international bodies ensuring that they exercise their responsibility to protect us all as global citizens.
Today's ruling comes after South Africa brought a case to the ICJ over allegations of genocide against the Palestinian people in the wake of the October 7th attacks, in which nearly 1,200 people were killed in Israel and some 240 taken hostage. The Hamas-run health ministry claims more than 25,000 people have been killed in Gaza, though their death count doesn't differentiate between civilians and Hamas fighters.
Comment on the ICJ ruling.
On the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau declined to share his thoughts on the court decision. Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs did release a statement saying, "Our support for the ICJ does not mean we accept the premise of the case brought by South Africa. It is for the ICJ to make a final decision on the case, which it has not done today."
So now the question is, what is Canada doing? We better be careful that we're not subsequently complicit in light of this decision.
In the face of mounting pressure, Israel's prime minister vowing today to continue the military operation.
Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous.
Though Netanyahu's government is now under the clock, they have just 1 month to produce a report on the measures they're taking in the war-torn region.
While the International Court of Justice decision is legally binding, the court alone can't enforce its own ruling. Heather?
All right, Adrian, thank you. Canada and the U.S. have suspended aid to the biggest organization providing relief in Gaza after serious allegations against its staff.
Any employee of UNRWA who is involved in acts of terror will be held accountable, including through criminal prosecution.
The U.S. says 12 employees of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees are fired and under investigation after they were accused of taking part in Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th. A jury in New York has ruled that former U.S. President Donald Trump must pay more than $83 million to writer E. Jean Carroll in a civil defamation suit.
Can we have a few words, please?
A triumphant Carol left the Manhattan courthouse after being awarded more than 8 times what she was seeking for damage done by Trump's denials that he sexually assaulted her in the mid-90s. Trump had already left before the verdict was read, but his lawyer was quick to react.
We will immediately appeal. We will set aside that ridiculous jury.
Trump took to social media calling the verdict absolutely ridiculous, referring to the trial as a Biden-directed witch hunt. For the first time in the U.S., nitrogen gas was used in the execution of an Alabama prisoner. But eyewitnesses are today detailing the troubling scene that played out when Kenneth Smith died. This method of capital punishment now at the center of global controversy. CTV's Vanessa Lee reports.
In his final words, Kenneth Smith said Alabama caused humanity to take a step backwards. He made the I love you sign with his hands towards his family and thanked them for supporting him before he was put to death with nitrogen gas.
It appeared that Warren Smith was holding his breath as long as he could, and then there's also information out there he struggled against his restraints a little bit, but there's some involuntary movement.
The first of its kind execution has once again placed the United States front and center in the debate over capital punishment.
We are deeply troubled by it.
While the White House says the president has long had deep concerns, both the European Union and UN Human Rights Office is condemning the killing.
It could amount to torture, inhuman, degrading treatment in violation of the treaties, the human rights treaties that the United States has signed.
Smith launched legal challenges, arguing the method amounted to unconstitutional, cruel, and unusual punishment. The U.S. Supreme Court denied a final bid to stay the execution, which witnesses say lasted 22 minutes.
What we saw was minutes of someone struggling for their life. We saw minutes of someone heaving back and forth.
Smith was sentenced to death for his role in the murder of 45-year-old Elizabeth Sennett. He was paid $1,000 to kill her.
Kenneth Smith made some bad decisions 35 years ago, and his debt was paid.
Alabama's Attorney General says the first execution using nitrogen hypoxia was textbook. Adding 43 other death row inmates are slated to die the same way. Heather. Vanessa, thanks. A major development in the case of an Ontario man accused of selling sodium nitrite online to people who later died by suicide. 14 charges against Kenneth Law have now been upgraded to first-degree murder. Here's CTV's John Woodward with the details.
I'm Ken, yeah.
Kenneth Law was once a chef at Toronto's prestigious Royal York Hotel, but police have said he had a side business, a set of online stores retailing deadly products, including a meat-curing agent, sodium nitrite, for those who wished to die by suicide. Police say Law sent more than 1,200 packages to over 40 countries, earning him the nickname in British media of the Poison King.
She didn't want to die, she wanted out.
Among his clients, 25-year-old Imogen Nunn, a British TikTok influencer. Her mother said Imogen struggled and was looking for mental health care, but when a package arrived, there was no turning back.
Unless you knew what they'd taken, this was just, it was final.
In Ontario, police have linked 14 deaths to Law's products, people as old as 36 and as young as 16. This week, Crown prosecutors upgraded the charges a second time to first-degree murder.
That would require evidence that the police are certain would give them grounds that Kenneth Law prepared these packages for the specific purpose of killing an individual.
Law now faces more charges than disgraced nurse Elizabeth Wetlaufer or serial killer Bruce McArthur, though lawyers acknowledge the novel case poses risks to the prosecution.
It's never been charged before. Not only never in Canada, never anywhere. So this is very much a test case.
Law, who is in custody, has long held he provided a service to those who needed it and is not legally responsible for what someone does with his products. Tracking by CTV News indicates those products may be tied to 125 deaths around the world. Nunn hopes the Canadian charges send a message and charges elsewhere will follow.
You cannot play with people's lives. You have not got that right.
Amid all of these shifting charges, Kenneth Law has not yet entered a plea. His lawyer says he will soon, and it will be not guilty. Heather?
John Woodward in Toronto tonight. An agonizing ordeal for families in the Northwest Territories, still waiting for the coroner to release the bodies of their loved ones, those killed in a plane crash in Fort Smith earlier this week. The deaths have shaken employees of the Diavik Diamond Mine, where most of them worked. Here's CTV's Judy Trin with the latest from Yellowknife.
The CEO of Rio Tinto, which owns the Diavik mine, is in the Northwest Territories. Jakob Stausholm flew in from Australia. He told us in an emotional interview that he's never had to deal with a tragedy of this magnitude. The Diavik Diamond Mine is located on the outer edge of the Arctic Circle. For the 1,200 employees here, flying is the only way to get to work.
I joined Rio Tinto 5.5 years ago, and until this accident, we have not had a single fatality, and we're very proud of that because safety is the most important thing.
On Tuesday, a British aerospace Jetstream plane carrying 7 people crashed into the woods moments after takeoff. Upon impact, it caught on fire. There was only one survivor. 4 investigators with the Transportation Safety Board are in Fort Smith collecting evidence.
Did it have an engine failure? Was he in icing conditions? Did he get de-iced before takeoff? So with the investigation, once we get the information from the black boxes, that'll give us some definite answers on it. 2 crew members of the charter jet company Northwestern Air died in the crash, along with 4 Diavik employees. CTV News has identified 3 of the victims, Joel Tetso, Howie Benwell, and Diane Balsillie. The coroner has yet to complete the autopsies. One other mine employee, Kurt McDonald, is in hospital with severe burns. It will take the TSB up to 15 months to determine the cause of the crash. Rio Tinto's CEO had little information to comfort workers in an emotional town hall.
I have never experienced such emotions in a room. We still haven't really understood that we have lost some of our dear friends and colleagues.
Rio Tinto CEO says he wants to meet with the families of the victims and of the lone survivor to offer personal condolences. But at this point, it's uncertain if they're ready to meet him. Judy Trin, CTV News, Yellowknife.
A family on Prince Edward Island desperately seeking answers in the murder of a school teacher finally got some today. With the help of DNA technology, police announced an arrest in connection with the death of Byron Carr. The cold case went unsolved for 35 years. CTV's Jack Morris reports.
An arrest in a cold case that eluded officers and kept Islanders on edge for decades.
His family and our community were left with a lot of unanswered questions. Most importantly, who was responsible?
56-year-old Todd Joseph Gallant, sometimes known as Todd Irving, is in custody. Arrested yesterday and charged with first-degree murder and interference with human remains in the 1988 killing of Byron Carr. Carr was found dead in the bedroom of his Charlottetown home more than 35 years ago, stabbed and strangled to death with a towel after what police at the time said was a consensual sexual encounter with another man. A grim message left scrawled on the wall: "I will kill again."
It's put panic through the community.
Carr, a Montague school teacher, was a gay man, but at the time of his killing had not told many of the people in his life, including his parents. John Carr, Byron Carr's brother, choked up speaking about his brother's murder.
It's been a long 35 years. Said I wasn't going to do this.
Charlottetown Police Chief Brad McConnell and Carr's brother say prejudice around Carr's sexuality complicated the initial investigation.
I can remember public officials that, were very lukewarm to taking part in the investigation.
Police say it isn't yet clear if the crime was hate-related. Investigators say the big break is due to genetic technology, genealogical DNA investigation, comparing samples taken from underwear the killer left at the scene and comparing it to DNA databases. Police say they believe Gallant had been living in Texas and Arkansas before returning to P.E.I. in 2022. Jack Moore, CTV News, Charlottetown.
King Charles is said to be doing well after undergoing a corrective procedure for an enlarged prostate. A smiling Queen Camilla left hospital after the king's planned surgery, telling reporters he is fine. The 75-year-old monarch will spend tonight at the same London clinic where his daughter-in-law, the Princess of Wales, is recovering from abdominal surgery. Coming up, answering the call.
It's hard on the classroom environment.
BC introduces new restrictions on the risk-reward of smartphones in school. Grappling with the growing role of smartphones, some politicians are putting the tech on pause. British Columbia has become the latest province to make a call on cell phones in classrooms. Here's CTV's Kamal Kramali.
Provinces now getting on the same wavelength when it comes to cell phones in classrooms.
Thank you all for being here today.
BC, the latest to announce restrictions.
It disrupts the flow of the classroom, it interrupts kids while they're learning, making it difficult for them to get back to where they started.
What those restrictions will look like, the Premier doesn't know yet. It's an issue other provinces have been grappling with. Quebec brought in a ban over the winter break, but some parents want a bigger focus on education around cell phone use.
You're not educating children on this addiction, on being a good digital citizen, on fake news, on all of that.
Quebec is the second province to impose restrictions after Ontario did it back in 2019. Both provinces' policies say phones must be tucked away except for learning purposes.
There's a lot of schools that don't have textbooks anymore. All of the tools that we had when we went to school aren't available now, and many of the tools are in that cell phone.
But the Toronto District School Board hopes to give that rule more teeth, voting in favor of updating the policy to possibly include an all-out ban, similar to countries like France and China.
There needs to be literally a physical break between you and your cell phone before you kind of gain those attentional resources back.
All of it raising questions on how teachers are expected to enforce it.
Challenging. It becomes a game of whack-a-mole where cell phone's out, it's put away.
Meanwhile, BC says it'll work with its school districts to determine the best way forward, hoping to implement these new restrictions by September. Heather.
Thanks, Kamal. The White House is calling on social media companies to do more to stop the spread of misinformation. The latest incident involves fake, explicit pictures of superstar singer Taylor Swift generated by artificial intelligence.
Sadly though, too often we know that lax enforcement disproportionately impacts women, and they also impact girls, sadly, who are the overwhelming targets of online harassment and also abuse.
Taylor Swift's spokesperson has not commented on the images viewed millions of times before most platforms remove them. Still ahead, homeward bound. Bear the dog lost in the countryside, found in the big smoke. We've all seen those movies tugging at our heartstrings where the pet dog goes missing only to be reunited with their owners months or years later. CTV's Allison Bamford has the real-life story of Bear, who took a bit of a cross-country trek.
I think I still have the first picture that I ever took of him.
Conrad Fredrickson last saw his dog Bear in the rear-view mirror when he left his Saskatchewan farm for the day.
And when I got back from golf, he was gone.
That was 4 months ago. Fredrickson and his friend spent weeks searching.
There's a lot of coyotes around that area. I assume that he was probably gotten by the coyotes.
And even longer wondering what happened to Bear.
I never really gave up hope, and I can't say he did either.
Until last week when Fredrickson got an unexpected call.
I don't normally answer phone calls from Ontario. I thought it was just going to be a scammer.
On the other end, a man saying he had Bear.
I'm still in shock.
Bear had traveled 2,500 kilometers to Toronto. A local vet identified him by his microchip when he was brought in for an exam.
When they were in the exam with the doctor, they explained that the son was working on a farm in Saskatchewan. A dog showed up on the farm, had a collar on, but he was afraid to take him to the shelter because he thought that they would euthanize him.
Instead, the man brought Bear home to Ontario without realizing.
He was obviously very sorry that he took him. He says, yeah, I'd like to know that my dog was still alive. So he reached out to me, and now we just got to put all the pieces together and go get him.
Frederickson's now crowdsourcing to help cover Bear's medical and travel expenses. The 3-year-old Shepherd mix needs a clean bill of health to fly home.
It'd be nice to get him back.
We have a piece of family coming back home.
And once Bear is back home, the first thing Frederickson plans to do is get him a dog tag. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
After the break, counting down to a Canadian dream. A satellite project helping students reach for the sky. These are anxious days for students from across the country who are counting down to the launch of their very own satellites into space. CTV's Garrett Berry spoke to one group that is ready to send their tiny creation around the globe.
It's small.
Milk carton is what we always say.
But this cube satellite packs a big punch. It's loaded with sensors.
You really got to be a quick problem solver, and we ended up fitting everything in.
And all these parts can pick up GPS signals and how they move around.
We can measure things like winds and waves, and sea ice because of the way those signals interact with the ocean and bounce back to our satellite.
In March, aboard the SpaceX Cargo Dragon, this technology is going to space, headed for the International Space Station. Students at Memorial University have loaded their CUBE satellite into the deployer. Next, blastoff.
I think my heart beat rate will be fast at that time, yeah.
Just getting to watch that is going to be a very proud moment for myself, the supervisor, and all the students who have worked on it.
Astronauts at the ISS will take the little box, just like this prototype, and send it into space. It will orbit a year watching GPS signals and the way they hit the Earth before burning up in the atmosphere. The concept isn't totally new, but part of their project was finding a way to fit the technology into this small frame that could make climate monitoring cheaper and easier.
So many things we can do with these data. These days, we're really concerned about climate change.
It's part of the Canadian Space Agency's CubeSat project that funded more than a dozen universities in Canada to build these small devices, each with their own purpose. This team believes it's the first time there's been a space satellite built in Newfoundland, and it was an easy sell to find students to participate.
Maybe every 2 days we get students say, can we be involved in this project?
Launch date is tentatively scheduled for March 4th, but students here are already looking forward, preparing another satellite for a future expedition. Garrett Berry, CTV News, St. John's.
The countdown to blastoff. That's our show for this Friday. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast.